Here's another episode of Battles with Bits of Rubber with Stuart and Todd.
Well, today, the subjects I think I wanted to talk to, I found these pieces that Adrian had sent me ages ago.
Yeah, the pictures look great.
Yeah, they look very cool. So basically, I'll briefly, basically it's a foam latex. It's not an appliance. It's from the appliance mold. But basically, when I was at college, I made this Odo makeup from Star Trek that my mate wanted to do because he was a costume guy. So he made the costume and it was a really cool costume. And I just did the makeup. And, I didn't really know that much about prosthetics. I had a rough idea of how to do it, but how to go.
It's a pretty good Odo likeness.
It wasn't too bad, but
if you watch Deep Space Nine, Odo's look went through some changes the first couple of seasons.
Well, I think it changed from sort of a more complex makeup to a mask, didn't it, towards the end? I think maybe it'd been a lot of applications and the guy was sick of it. I don't know.
It was pretty featureless face.
Yeah, it's an interesting look. It's really nice and quite a difficult one to do as an early makeup because there's nowhere to hide. There's no wrinkles. There's no folds. Completely smooth. There's a few wrinkles on the forehead, but they're very subtle. But with all that, with the wig and everything, and the fact that Michael Westmore was behind it also, he did a much better job than I did when I was 20.
Can't go wrong.
Crap, so but yeah, so I stuck this piece on anyway. Adrian and this guy that I applied it to. His friend was Adrian, who I hadn't known, and that's how I met Adrian, was through this other guy, because we all went to LA together to sort of have a look and scope out the area and see if it was viable that we could go work there or something. After we left college, this would be 95. So
I remember you telling me about that. Yeah,
it was good fun. But so this makeup is anyway. He had kept the piece and had a bunch of these photos, and this was nearly 30 years ago this was done. So he sent me this crispy bit of foam latex, and I took pictures, and it just it was weird. I just wanted to talk a little bit about like when you have something from the past that you made that you can examine, and it's weird how you kind of look at it with your old eyes because you can remember how you felt when you did it. But then you look at it now and you kind of go, well, I wouldn't have done my ages like that. Well, clearly I did because
it's the same with stuff that I did just a few years ago. The hope is that we're always going to be improving and not hit a plateau. It's when you stop trying, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it made me think, that's the thing. It's like wherever you're at any given point, if you're pursuing it and you're making mistakes and you're doing things, you'll move on from that and you'll advance. And it's an unusual feeling, and it's odd because you do that and you sometimes look at pictures, but when you actually have a piece that you made, that's what I quite like about this sort of practical stuff, is you do have physical artifacts that you can kind of retain, and holding a hand, go, wow, I actually cast this piece, this came out of the mold. And it was
kind of interesting that when you're first starting out, the perception of your work when you're a dumbass and don't know anything is that's pretty good. and then as you learn more and you improve, your satisfaction with your work drops lower and lower and lower until the point that you're like, God, I just need to go be a greeter at Walmart because I have no talent whatsoever for this makeup shit.
We don't have greeters here in the store, so I'm curious about this reference that you make. Is it really such a?
I don't know if they still do what they used to, where it was a retiree who was just there volunteer, basically making sure that the carts in the entranceway are not blocking people's pathways and stuff. And they're saying, "Hi, welcome to Walmart. Can I direct you somewhere?" Just something for these old farts to do. Keep them out of trouble.
Sounds like a fun job, actually. I think I could do.
It's something I think I'm ideally suited for.
Yeah. Can I wear headphones when I do it? So I can listen to podcasts. So
bust a move.
So it was a curious thing that I've written a little piece about this, and I'll put this as in part of the show notes with the pictures so you can see what I'm talking about, because I have some nice pictures of the processes. But it's just weird
and
how
your
you sort
cute
of,
little college baby face.
I've still got like nothing like any beard stubble and these big round glasses, which make me look like a terrified owl that thinks it can smell gas. Quite a strange look. But yeah, it's weird. I remember, that you remember when you hold this thing that you knew then, you remember what you knew then, and then you think about how it should be done now, because you look at it and go, well, if I was doing this now, I would never have done that. So it's kind of a weird place where you have both of those memories in your head at the same time. You remember how you felt at the time, and you remember how you would feel now if this was your job, because you're looking at it as if somebody else did it. But
do you remember what your grade
in the past?
Do you remember what your grade on the project was?
No, I can't remember, because it was an overall project for the degree, which I got a 2-1 for my degree.
I take it that's very good.
It's all right. It's like, it's not a first, but I didn't think I was ever getting a first, but I was happy with the 2-1.
So your grading system sounds quite different than it is over here.
I think it might be different now. I don't know. It's been a while since all this was a long time ago. So, but yeah, but it was fun to look at. But it made me realize that, that a great deal of energy, I've noticed in some colleges I teach, a lot of energy can be spent trying to avoid error. People ask about tips, or they'll say, how do I do this? How do I do that? And it's quite reasonable, I think, to try and avoid avoidable errors. But at the same time, if you avoid one area, you're going to be subject to the circumstances where another one will be hit. You just roll the dice again tomorrow. So,
yeah,
it's interesting.
Well, I think it's something that's difficult for all beginners to kind of make sense of, because I think it's almost like, leaning into a punch. When you're first figuring it out, you don't think that making mistakes is a good thing. You want to try to do things as perfectly as possible when you're first starting out. And as you progress, you realize that if you don't fuck things up, you don't learn anything.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, you absolutely don't you welcome any mistake when they go wrong. You're not happy about it at all.
No,
it's never a good thing. But at the same time, it's only afterwards you realize how valuable those lessons were. And I can remember distinct things that I did badly, or things that went awry, which at the time I remember being very frustrated, but they were also incredibly formative experiences. Unless you're standing around a pile of ashes and thousands of dead bodies, that's not great. But most of the things I've done haven't ended like that. It's just, oh shit, I got to do this again. And
yeah, well, if you go through the whole process and never make mistakes, it either means you're not trying very hard to begin with, or at some point down the road, there's going to be a catastrophic screw up that you won't know how to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think this might loop back to one of the other questions we're going to get to next, about with regards to that, because I think that's a really good point, because I think you need to build up slowly. I mean, this was quite a small makeup, really. It was just, a small face piece, and it wasn't that extensive. But you do see a lot of people sort of trying to run before they walk. They're trying to do something very extensive. And it's not that it's a bad thing to do that, but it's just, if you fail, and I think you've mentioned this before, if you flunk out on something really big that's expensive, that's taking you a long time, that might scare you off from trying again. Whereas if you did something small, it might screw up, but it's not going to cost you so much money, and you won't take that much time to kind of recover from it. And
it's a fine line we have to walk as teachers in that regard, because if we step on that big moment, then there's no way you can't do that. You're throwing water on their fire. But if you just let them go, I said, why didn't you stop me? You knew it was going to fail.
Yes. Yeah, there is that. So yeah, I mean, looking at these pieces as well, I mean, I'll go over the technical stuff of this sculpt, looking at where this sculpt, I sculpted it in plastiline. So I had plastiline then, and looking at the color of it, I can see this is the Herbin stuff, which we have over here, which comes from France. And I have got one picture where there's a slice along the side of the mouth where it looks like I was thinking about making the chin and the upper face separate pieces. But I know at that time I wouldn't have known how to do, floating off and separating pieces onto different cores. But obviously I'd played with the idea of that. And I remember making my molds in Cristacal, which is a plaster we have here, which is not as good as your Ultracal, which is far superior. So certainly a lot more stable when it comes to being baked in the foam oven. I made one in Cafe D as well. The ears are in Cafe D, which is like a yellow dental stone. But yeah, it was good fun to do, and it's a tricky one. But I've got some pictures anyway on the thing, so you can have a look at that and you can see what I mean. But I remember looking at it, thinking at the time, yeah, this is good fun. But it's awful. It's lit badly. I've taken some pictures with flash. The backdrop's dodgy. The whole thing just kind of sucks. But at the same time,
You can see the edge around the face.
Totally, you can. It's like the San Andreas fault.
What were you thinking?
But it's interesting because the thing is, like I say, whenever anything goes awry, it's because there's something you should have done you didn't do, or you did something you shouldn't have done. And I can see exactly what I should have done.
But it's clearly Odo, and it's not a bad likeness.
No, it isn't. But thank you. I mean, that's and I think Lee's costume, he made the costume for it and everything, that worked a treat. And it was good fun. But it's just, when I look at those things, I see it like some of the pictures I get sent when people have advice, and the first thing I do is I see the things that are wrong with it, and in a way I'm pleased because I can point to what they are, and I can see this to my old self where I've gone wrong. And it's good to see, because it's like, look, everyone makes these mistakes because they're not easy things to do. It's not obvious, because if it was, everyone would be doing it.
Right.
There's no value in something that everyone can do easily.
And it's a good attempt. I mean, you were just brand new at this stuff, but you probably would have got sent home from Face Off.
Probably. But I took some pictures of the crusty foam on the back. It's really interesting how you have this.
That's a nice texture. It's too bad you can't actually make a mold of that.
Yeah. Well, if I had a scanner that could scan that.
Scanner could. Yeah.
Yeah. You think what the scanner is going to be like in 10 years, how good that would be. It'll be on your iPhone. You could just.
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I've been talking with Rod Maxwell. He's involved with a lot of the 3D stuff, and I have now NDA'd into something that he's working with that maybe at some point we'll be able to talk about on the podcast.
Nice.
But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that I may get my hands on an Artex scanner to play with for the book.
Excellent stuff.
So I'm hoping to find out here in the very near future about that. But excellent. I already have a RevoPoint Pop 2 scanner, which I purchased a few months ago, and I'm really enjoying that. It's
excellent.
I'm getting very good results with it.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Even if you've got like a basic scanner, it's still how you use it. And so I think if you become practice with it, you can actually do a decent job.
Yeah.
And there's a few different scanners for different things. Some are for very small things, some are for big things, and
even the RevoPop has settings for close up and far away for doing things like if you wanted to scan a motorcycle, there are settings that you can change in the scanner to do bigger far away things.
Excellent.
Or you can get right up close and do somebody's face, or you can do a full body, and it's pretty. I'm still figuring it all out, but I'm having fun doing it.
It's pretty versatile though for that price point as well. That's quite nice.
Yeah, and the level of detail is easily doable for life casting, for facial and body part scanning to sculpt on.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, it's interesting that level of detail, because depending on how you come at it, I had this discussion, we had a chat on this film I was on, which I left recently. I had to leave because of COVID. It finally got me after 2.5 years, so I was off work for a couple of weeks, but that pretty much took me to the end of my job anyway. So that's done and dusted. But I'm over that, thankfully. But yeah, we were talking about how it's interesting how some people really like all the super fine detail on the thing they're sculpting, and others quite like it to be a bit smoother because it releases, the pieces release from the mold easier. And the sculpted texture, as long as the sculpted texture is correct, then the piece should blend in. But it depends. Some people really like to see the sculpture on the life cast or the scan, so that they can actually sculpt up to that texture.
Right.
And it depends on the sculpture of the piece, I suppose. If you've got something that's covering the whole head in rubber, there's no real skin to compare it to. So actually,
if you're not getting that skin texture from the scan, when you bring it into ZBrush or whatever software you're cleaning it up in, you can always put a little texture into it. So you've got that when you print and
I
then start
suppose it's just
sculpting on it.
it's just whether or not it's the same as, you know, capturing reality. But like something like, I remember seeing, I had nothing to do with the making of it, but I did some application days on Red Dwarf a few years back, and they had the new, you know, version of the Crichton makeup. I think Millennium had done for on Robert Llewellyn, you know, who plays Crichton, and he had been scanned, and so the piece fitted him beautifully because there was no, you know, weight, and some of the areas, especially around the eyes, are quite thin. So it's really nice to see that even a low resolution scanner, which may not be as high a resolution, you know, print, but the point is the forms are correct, everything in the right place, and it is their head. It's not their head with shit on it. So you haven't got any of this distortion and sagging, which is more of an issue, you know, as you get older, because the skin elasticity is loose, you know, looser, and so it kind of, you know, kind of drags a little. And
I was literally just writing about that in my book revision for the fourth edition. Excellent. Talking about one of the benefits of scanning as you get older, because the collagen starts to break down and your skin gets looser, and it will droop on its own. And since it's just a little softer, and this can even lead into the conversation we want to have about deadener, that the softer your skin is, the more it's going to be affected by the weight of a life casting material, whether it's alginate or silicone. And you may get a really beautiful life cast out of it, but it's not going to be the same as if you did it in zero gravity, which essentially is what you're doing with a scanner. Even though there is the force of gravity, you're not adding to it. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, it's interesting that we have coped with it for years, but that's the point. We've coped with it. I mean, we coped with not having penicillin, you know, for generations. But now that we know that shit, let's not throw that away. You know,
change is essential for growth.
Yeah, so it's difficult, and it's difficult as well, I think, trying to accommodate things, because I notice, I saw a few posts about you know, comedians and stuff that, you know, there was something about John Cleese had said a bunch of stuff that, and you know, older people were saying like, yeah, but it was interesting to see some people saying, look, just because you don't like that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just that you're doing that thing that older people do where they find stuff that's not aimed at them and then choose to dislike it. And it's a really good point. You can kind of catch yourself sort of just out of habit, sort of rejecting stuff wholesale because it's new. And I know there was a big chunk of that with the whole CG practical debate for years. And what's interesting is that a lot of digital stuff has crept into practical applications, even something as basic as digital photography, you know, with the convenience of being able to take your phone and take a photo and upload it to Dropbox and work on it later in Photoshop is so functional that it's now impossible to imagine that you would not have that available. So, you know, it doesn't take that much to creep into other things. So it starts becoming part of your own, you know, vocabulary. It's not that weird. And I think it's, you know, there are some things that you know, they're ridiculous to kind of reject because they're so utterly, they have such utility, and they're becoming more, the entry level and the ease of which they can be utilized is huge. And they don't they do replace some things, but they don't replace you utilizing it, using it. Like, you know, you can have you know, a drawing app like Procreate, but people who draw well and who are creative will still do a better job with that amazing software than someone that's just going to throw a bunch of templates together. It'll look very samey. Do you know what I mean? You can see
well, it's still just a tool. You know, it's the operator, not the software.
True enough.
The software can make a really good artist do amazing things, but you know, it can also show off the glaring flaws of a shitty artist who doesn't know how to do anything.
Well, it's the same with, you know, texturing and, you know, with sculpts and stuff. You can see when someone's just throwing a texture stamp or something, or they've got a technique for doing a particular texture, and then they'll just do that everywhere because they know how to do it. And it's like, it's a nice texture, but it's not actually right, you know, because it's overplayed. It's like using a highlighter pen on every single word of a page. It's like it ceases to function as a highlight now because it's all the same. It doesn't mean anything. So it's employing these devices in the right way. That is the creative aspect of it, I suppose. So we had a couple of questions that were good questions that we backed and forth on answers that I thought would be good to discuss. One of which was about deadener percentages. So one email was from Bethany, and she asked about having struggled with deciding how soft to make silicon pieces in areas of the body. She's making a cheek piece, and it needs to be as realistic as possible, but you never know how to judge how much deadener is needed to make these flesh areas move around properly. So previously, if I make them too hard, they don't move. They're too stiff.
Yep.
But when I make them too soft, it wrinkles and sags and does weird things. So how soft would you make this very thin cheek prosthetic? And in general, is there any advice on how to judge how much deadener you need for certain things?
Question number one.
Would be much appreciated. Thank you again for all the knowledge you guys share. The podcast has saved me many times already. More regards,
Thanks, Bethany. Cool. I'm glad. Love hearing that. Question number one is how old is the character that's going to be wearing this prosthetic?
Yeah,
because a 20-year-old's cheek is going to be firmer than a 75-year-old's cheek.
Yes, and I've also noticed that the thickness of the piece can make a big difference too. Because it's a very good. We had a good chat a while ago. I think it was an IMATS with Floris Schuler, and he was saying something about, and it was really good because I've made this mistake many times where you would sculpt something the thickness you think it needs to be, and then when the makeup's on, it kind of sags and pulls down, and the face looks bigger. So you almost need to know that's going to happen, and you compensate by sort of reducing the sculpt a bit. Kind of like when you sculpt pieces for bondos, you sculpt them a little bit thicker because you know the bondo is going to shrink once the water evaporates out. So when I say bondo, I mean prostate transfers, if that's not a word you use for that. I know I think
a good rule of thumb is sculpt the piece as thin as possible. That's still going to allow you to put the detail into it that it needs to convey whatever age or skin condition you're sculpting.
Yeah. And also with regards to how much deadener, it depends on the deadener you're using and the silicon you're using as well. Because obviously if you're using gel 10, Platsil gel 10, you would use, typically you used to use the Smith theatrical deadener. That's what it came out with at the time. But now you also have deadener LV, which is a lower viscosity deadener. It's much runnier and it's also much potent, and you need like half as much of that because it's really strong. So if you're using gel 10 with Smith's deadener, I tend to use between 150 and 200% of that of deadener. So if you've got 10 grams of A and 10 grams of B, that's a total of 20 grams. I would have 40 grams of theatrical deadener up to that to make the piece quite squishy. It depends where it is. If it's a squishy neck, you need that to be really, really squishy. If it's a long pointy nose or long pointy ears, you don't want them flopping around like a billiard ball in the sock. So,
probably wouldn't need any deadener at all for that.
No, exactly. You could make them quite stiff. In fact, some ears would be great because you could swill the ears with pure undeadened silicon, and then maybe top it up with deadened silicon. But ears don't move much, so yeah, maybe you're right. Don't even bother with deadener at all for ears. In fact, it's really frustrating when people give you really soft ear pieces, and they're hard to handle. And when they're on, the ears don't move. So why are they that soft?
Right.
They could just be solid, silicon. So
somebody in the shop just showing off.
But I think, yeah. So if you're using like gel 25, maybe 100% deadener would be fine. And I think we should probably just clarify a little bit about what we mean by percent. I mean, it should be, I think it's pretty standard procedure that you deal with the silicon is part A and part B mixed together. It's like a sandwich is two pieces of bread. If you haven't got the two pieces of bread, it ain't a sandwich. So you need the A and the B for it to be the silicon. So the A and the B is the silicon. So the percentage of deadener, when we say like 100% or 150%, it's that amount. So yeah, if you've got 10 grams of A, 10 grams of B, that's a total of 20 grams. So 100% deadener would be 20 grams of deadener.
Right.
So the combined mix
Smooth On has a deadener they call Slacker, and they do it all like 1 part A to 1 part B. 1 part Slacker gives you a tacky silicone. If you do 1 part A, 1 part B, and 2 parts Slacker, you get very tacky. So that would be, the first one to 1 to 1 is 100%. 1 to 1 to 2 is 200%. 1 to 1 to 3, you get a really tacky gel-like.
I would say that 1 to 1 to 1 is 50%.
Yes, you're right. You're right. And then one part A, 1 part B, and 4 parts slacker. That would be your 200%. Is super
gooey,
like gooey, and it's going to be really droopy.
And
you're hardly. That's maybe okay under a neck, but you probably wouldn't want to go that high for anything else.
Well, the trouble is when you make a piece, depends on how big the piece is, but when the piece is that soft, good luck trying to hold on to it when you're trying to apply it, because it just kind of sags under its own weight.
Yeah.
And I've seen the first person I ever saw do this, I think, was at Neil Gorton's, and I'm guessing Neil was behind that. But he, for very big wraparound pieces, he would put pieces of wig lace on the core, from sort of the temple down to the jaw, so that it would stop it sagging. It still had the softness everywhere else, so it would still move, but it didn't drag. So you could hold it here.
The same thing on the top for pieces that go on the top of the head.
Yes, something to hold it together. So that's a good thing to do. And I've done something recently. I sent some pieces out for a show, for some reshoots for some things I did. And it was a bald pate piece that goes over the hair and needs to be pinned into the hair at the back. So I set silk on the core on the back 2/3. So the front third is just pure silicone. The back 2/3 has like silk muslin laid on the core first. So you can't see it, but it just means you can pin through it and pull it tight. That's why you use silk, because there's no stretch at all, and it's really, really super thin. So you can pin through it and put wig clips and stuff on it, and hold it tight on the head. So it depends, like you say, depends where at the top of the head there's no movement really, so that can be quite firm. I think I made that about 50%, but everything else is much,
because they really have nothing but connective tissue on the top of the head. There's no muscle. The frontalis muscle stops at your hairline.
Yes.
And
it does sometimes look like real bald people are wearing a bald cap, doesn't it? Because there's that kind of, that, like you said, that hard line where it kind of stops.
Yeah.
But so in short, I guess it depends on the silicone and the deadener. But if it's gel 10 and theatrical deadener, I would say 100% is a decent amount, thereabouts. Right. And 150 to 200% for gel 10 if you're using theatrical deadener. If you're using gel 25 with LV deadener, I tend to go about 100% as a general rule of thumb. But I think, honestly, the only way you can be sure is to run a piece, try it, and see.
And it is definitely going to depend on the silicone you use, because you're talking about the Polytech Gel 10 and Gel 25, Smooth On, their FX, their Dragon Skin FX Pro would be the complement to Gel 10. But then they've got EcoFlex, Double Aught 30, Double Aught 20, Double Aught 10, and the Double O is getting really, really soft on its own.
Right.
So, there's some stuff. They've even got some new stuff now. They've got a gel and a gel 2, they call it, that basically is off the Shore A and Shore hardness scale. It's Triple Aught 34 and Triple Aught 35.
Right.
Which is without adding any deadener on its own. It's all you got to do is encapsulate that stuff, and it's
pretty gooey.
It's pretty gooey to begin with.
See, that's an interesting one, because there's that struggle with depending on who's doing this stuff. Some people, like a chef, they want to be able to fuck with the recipe, so they don't appreciate these decisions being made in the manufacturing.
Right.
But a lot of people just want something soft, and they don't want to have to figure out. I know when we talk about percentages, half the people listening to this are soiling themselves because they hate maths. So, and that's fine.
Well, if you've got a silicone that's already the gel consistency you need for prosthetics, that's a huge time saver, because you don't have to mix anything up. All you have to do is spray your encapsulant in the mold and mix the silicone, and you're good to go.
But it is very much the case. I think you do need to I mean, you're right. I mean, when I'm saying my recommendations, I'm basing on what I know, which is the Polytech stuff. I'm not familiar with the Smooth On stuff at all. Although I've noticed a lot of people that don't find their cap plastic stick into the silicone. It's Smooth On silicone that they're using. I've never had that problem with Polytech. Just saying.
It's weird because it's pretty much the same formula.
Is it?
Yeah. Well, Polytech started from, it was Smooth On guys that started Polytech.
Right. But there's something about the Polytech stuff I had where it kind of leaches more as well. But it could just be that they've managed to modify the formula just enough so it's not the same that they can't be sued. I don't know, but yeah, I am familiar more with the Polytech, so I must obviously, in order to be fair, there may be, like you say, an equivalent to Smooth On, but I don't know what that is.
Oh, everybody's got their favorites. But, I tend to use more Smooth On stuff just because there's a Smooth On store 10 minutes from me.
Yeah. I mean,
if I need something,
stuff is lovely.
If I need something, I can get it immediately. Yeah, their epoxy is first rate.
I mean, the epoxy coat, the gel coat that is the best gel coat. I mean, even if I use other paste sometimes, I will always use that gel coat because I think it's a good gel coat. But but with regards to the percentage, I think the other thing you could try is to get like really, really thin Ziploc bags, like little 4x3 little Ziploc baggies, and mix up 5 or 6 small samples with different percentages of slacker or deadener and pour them into those bags and seal them up and let them go off so that you can squeeze them without getting, crap all over them, and you can feel how soft they are.
That's a great idea.
So you don't commit to, your mold to find out the hard way. But ultimately,
and then take a Sharpie and write on it so you can put that sample up on
the wall, yeah,
on a wall, and you've got something to refer to always. That's
because it's
idea.
Interesting that you can't. There must be devices that do it, but typically we don't have anything like this. But how you measure the squishiness of skin, it's kind of an art, isn't it? Like when you're handling the face with the life casting, or you do a test makeup, you get to feel how soft the skin is, and then you've got to make a piece.
I'd say this is about 80%.
Yeah, exactly. It could just be that, and that's one of the benefits of making a makeup, I think, in multiple pieces, is that you can assign them different softnesses because each one is made in a different piece. Especially if you color. This is the other thing. I will color my A, I'll color my B, and I color my deadener separately, the same color, so that no matter how much deadener I use, the piece is the same color. Whereas if you're only deadening, coloring your deadener, and one piece has got more deadener than another, you'll find you're having to compensate by adding more pigment, which you don't want. Whereas if you just pigment but all three, yes, it takes more time, but guess what? You get good at mixing flesh tones because you're doing it 3 times every time. So, and that's why you're here, right? Because you want to get better. So
and this is all stuff that you should be doing tests beforehand and not doing this on the day when you are under the gun to get something finished and realize you've miscalculated everything.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is one of the reasons why the people that price jobs up right, they charge more, because they know they have to do this. And it is not uncommon for people who don't know what they're doing to charge less in order to try and undercut and get the job, only to then find out that they've now got to carry this job without all the test makeups and all these extra time that they should have fought for. And now they're going to do a crappy job and hate every second of it.
And making no money at all.
Save a few, it's like, no. There's a threshold you don't want to go below. You don't want to race to be the cheapest because you might win. And that's not a fun place to be. So, but yeah, so with the deadener thing, that's why I think percentages are good, because if you work out what the percentage is, you can try the piece on and go, this is soft, or it's too soft, or it's not soft enough. By how much do we think it's not soft enough? Well, I reckon it could be another 10, 15% softer. So quantity-wise, how much to mix up. And then if you're mixing up a piece for 1 chin or 100 chins, it doesn't matter. The percentage is what matters. So that's why I think that's worth doing. But you won't know for sure. And obviously, if you make your piece not soft enough, like you say, it might look fine in a still, but when the skin around it is compressing and squishing, and the piece can't keep up with it, and the cap plastic wrinkles and does weird things, then obviously that's a problem. And if it's too soft, if you can stick the piece on, a piece that's too soft isn't normally that much of a problem. But if it's a big piece, it's heavy, if it weighs 3 or 4 kilos, it's just like handling snot. I mean, it's just
there's one other ingredient that we need to bring into this mix too, that even if you get the percentage for your deadener to get the softness exactly how it should be, if your encapsulate, if your cap plastic is too thick, it's gonna look like crap.
Yeah, wrinkle up weird.
Because it's gonna wrinkle up weird and not look real.
Yeah, and that can be that can be a reason to make a piece bigger than it needs to be, particularly necks. You know, I've seen a lot of pieces where someone will have a neck piece on and then they're in a bed. And so that their chin is, you know, tilted at a weird angle and it compresses funny. And so you get these weird lines. Whereas if the piece was carried under the jaw and around the back of the neck, even though that's a much bigger piece, it means the majority of the wrinkling is happening not in the front. You don't see it, or it's under costume.
This is all stuff that needs to be considered in the design process of how it's going to be used on camera or on stage, however it's going to be used.
Yeah.
Figure that out beforehand so that when the actor who's wearing it moves the way they're going to be moving, it's going to look natural and realistic.
Yeah. And one last thing, because I did reply to her, but I haven't done this myself on a large scale. I've done it with small pieces, but you could do that Kevin Yeager trick where you make a foam piece and then you snip away the surface. So there's like 3 or 4 mil back from the mold, then put that back in the mold and then flood that with silicone. So and I've done that with like sort of big creature heads or something where you might run the head in polyfoam and then cut back 1/4 of an inch with a pair of scissors. It takes a while, but you basically reduce the height, you know, the thickness all around, put that polyfoam back on the core, put your mold around it, and then inject silicone around that. So you've got like a skin of silicone, but the bulk of it is taken up with foam. And that could be a good thing to do. If you've got a lot to do, I guess you could make a mold, you know, make a reduced core. So you have an insert that you make that takes that up. That could help.
I think that's what Kevin did for the muscle suits in Bill and Ted's, the latest Bill and Ted movie.
Yeah, they look fucking great.
Yeah.
They really do look good.
Foam, latex, and silicone.
Yeah, they really do look good. And I think, I'm pretty sure Michael Keyes has got a Makeup Artist Magazine podcast. There's a few out. I'll put a link to it. But there is one when he talks to Kevin Yeager, and Kevin Yeager talks about these suits. And it's amazing because I think they were tin silicone, but because none of it was
they
in
would
contact
have to
with
be
the skin, because
they would have to
inhibition. But you don't typically use tin on skin, but they're not on skin; they're on the foam suit, so it worked really well.
And
so
tin,
it's very impressive.
cured tin on skin is fine.
So, but it was under a foam suit, so it wasn't touching down on the skin anyway. I think you made blenders for a platinum, but a beautiful bit of work. But yeah, I will put our responses on there, but. It's a case of suck it and see. Really, you've got to do it and see how it looks because you can't guess all the time. But it's one of those things. Right. Question number 2. This is a general question I've bundled together. So we've had a few of these, which are basically the same question, which is, can you look at my folio and give me some advice? And one of the things I notice, and I don't know if colleges push this or if it's just untempered ambition, but a lot of them seem to have big creatures with horns and teeth, and they might have 500 horns or this thing smothered in teeth, and that's great to see. I get it. You watch stuff like Stranger Things and you get all juiced up about monsters and you want to do big creature stuff, and that's lovely. I get it, totally do. If I was there, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. I can remember asking Dave White for some advice about what makeup to do on something. And he suggested, this was years and years ago when I started working for him on something like 20 years ago. And he was saying, oh, just do an age makeup and a fat makeup, but not a lot, just a little bit. Give him 10 years and 20 or 30 pounds. And I remember thinking, that sounds like such a shit makeup, because in my head, I wanted to go big. I wanted to go extreme.
You wanted to go fat bastard.
Yeah, I wanted to do something like that. And which I've done in real life with eating food, but but he was absolutely right. It's like the skill is doing it subtly and not shouting, with your makeup. It can be a carefully crafted whisper. It doesn't need.
My
to be
guess
bellowed.
is that the school has something to do with that. That they have some portfolio requirements that they need students to meet for certain parts of the course, and to put that in the portfolio. It was certainly true in the animation and visual effects program at one of the colleges where I taught. The school doesn't exist anymore, right. But you would see everybody's demo reel had the same stuff in right. it. And it said it, in one sense, I get why they're doing it, but it's also preventing them from expressing their own creativity and their own voice.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on what the brief is, I suppose. But here's my issue with it, I mean, it's not, like I say, it's not that I have a problem with creatures per se, because I love those things. It's awesome. But it's more the point that when you're starting out, I think you need to have learned, there's like a bunch of basic skills I think you need to have mastered, really. And I would say they include some basic anatomy, but from a functional point of view, it's blending edges, like making edges that disappear into the skin, demonstrate that you know how to do that, and matching a skin tone. So you make a piece of rubber that is the same as the skin that it's sitting on, so that once it's blended in, and this is why I'm not a big fan of things. I say I'm not a big fan of. If the makeup requires it, then of course do it. But what I'm saying is, if in the early stages when you're trying to demonstrate your competence, I think there are a few benchmark things you need to do in order to establish that you know how to do this. So one would be a realistic nose, like a nose that once applied, if I didn't know you, I wouldn't know you were wearing makeup, because that means your edges and your appliance and your color have gone completely undetected. That to me is a very successful makeup, because you've hidden in plain sight. If you do a great pig nose or a bat nose or something, that's fun, but people don't have snouts. So if I see a snout on one, no matter how well it's done, it's clearly makeup, right? And so that illusion isn't available to you. If you can do a realistic nose and make it look real, I'm pretty sure you can do a witch. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So I'm pretty sure you can do a cut.
That's
but I want to see that.
The biggest compliment you can. The biggest compliment you can pay to a visual effects artist is to look at their finished work and have no idea what they did. So I can't tell that anything's there at all.
Yeah.
Perfect. I succeeded. So yes, I agree with you with the nose, showing a mastery of anatomy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be human anatomy. If you're doing a non-human character makeup, muscles and joints still work the same way, whether it's human or alien. The way muscles insert and how you can rotate your forearm and bend your fingers. Doesn't matter whether you're a werewolf or a zombie. It's movement still has to be the same. So understanding how we work beneath the skin is going to inform what we look like on top of the skin.
Yeah, and that could be if you're doing a bigger suit, that's certainly important. And I guess if you're doing facial pieces, like I've seen jaw appliances on people, where the real jaw is moving around underneath, and then the piece you apply is sitting on the skin. So you get this weird situation when they have like a double jawline where their real jaw is moving under the skin, which you can't really beat that, but it's being aware of that and knowing, well, maybe I don't do that as an appliance there, maybe that's something else, or it's painting, highlighting, shadow. But it's, I want to be clear, I'm not down on creatures per se. What I'm saying is, if you don't have realistic noses, if you don't have ball caps, if you don't have sort of nice realistic character pieces, as well as you haven't been able to demonstrate that you know those things. Whereas if you got, if I see a folio that has creatures as well as a couple of realistic makeups as well that look, you see a flawless nose, a great ball cap, beautiful hand laid hair, or whatever, you go, wow, you can do these things well. The other thing is as well, from a student who's not going to college, where they're not going to have a bunch of materials necessarily, those things are really cheap to do, like a realistic nose in latex, a small chin piece, a flat molded set of eye bags. They can be done for a lot less money. And you get to burn through iterations. You could try 4 or 5 of those, for 20 quid worth of material, and screw it up and realize, oh shit, I don't know how to make edges and I don't know how to match skin tones. Because I've had people show me folios of like a half creature suit on stilts with, flares and balloons, and they're floating around on wires. And then they're asking me how to match the skin tone and how to get rid of the edges. I'm like, surely you would have, surely they taught you how to land the plane before you took off, right? It's like, it's one of those things, surely. So I don't know. So it struck me as, I'm not a pilot, so that might not be a great analogy, but do you know what I mean? It's just, you want to know those things.
That is the proper order of events.
So it just seems to me that if you're interested in showing someone that you know how to do that, I'm championing the value to the people who would hire you, your ability to hide a piece of rubber in plain sight and make it look like real skin. That as underwhelming as that is on Instagram and how few likes that will get, the people that actually pay money to have people that can do that, that's really, really important. A before and after picture, so you can prove that the nose is fake, is also, useful, because if you make a
and
great
photographed
job of it,
in lighting that is not dramatic lighting, to
yes,
be able to, if there's a flaw in the edge, you want it to be lit well enough so you can see it.
yeah, and that's hard,
Or not,
see.
Yeah, because the goal is to not see the edges. So photograph your pieces in good high key lighting so that the makeup can be examined.
Yeah,
that's the point.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's like when you get, as well, I think it's quite important to do realistic, natural looking things, because it asks less of you as the maker. You don't feel as obliged to construct an entire story behind this thing, because I have seen, for example, and again, this isn't a criticism, it's an observation, but I've seen some colleges that will make the students, part of the thing is they've got to make a costume. They may have to provide a backdrop. They'll supply the photographer and they'll light it nicely for them. But it's like, I've never been asked to make the set or build the costume. Like, when I say costume, I mean like, a Victorian dress. It's like that on a real show, that would be the wardrobe or the costumes job. So it's kind of, it hobbles you to have to spend a lot of time doing that, if that's not actually the makeup. But it does mean that you get great pictures that look good, and that would maybe go onto the brochure for next year's college, so they secure more students. So I get the reason to do it. I'm just saying it's a shame when you've seen an extensive makeup that's taken a whole 2 semesters or whatever to do, and it's still not as good as a nice ball cap, which could have been done in a weekend.
Right.
It doesn't show off as much. What I'm looking for, I can't see in that makeup, because you spent ages making this lovely crinoline dress, but I'm not hiring people to make crinoline dresses. That's costume. And maybe you're going to get costume work, and that's fine, but this isn't a costume course. See what I mean? So it's odd. If you were going to be a chef, then would expect you to mine your own steel and craft your own pots and pans before you started cooking. The chef's job is to take available existing items and then, mix ingredients in them. So
I got to build a stove before I can cook this omelet.
Exactly. And that has a value in itself. And I'm sure there's, people that do that. But I'm just, from a practical point of view, I think there's something to be said for just doing a nice, simple, clean makeup, demonstrating that the fundamentals well. And those simple things, as well as the creatures, would show that. And also, you'll do better creatures in a year from now if you get this shit sorted now. Because if you stick a nose on that you made and it's crap and you hate it and it looks horrible, you've got something to work with. You already know what it is you don't know, and it didn't cost you 15 grand to find it out. So that's my call to arms. Make noses. They're really good.
Yeah, make a nose.
And also, I think when you see a lot of homages and stuff, like you'll see a lot of people doing like a Hellboy makeup, with paper mache or whatever. And those things can be quite good. They can. I mean, we've seen the Rick Baker Nosferatu that he did using paper mache. I mean, it as a material, it's fine. But it's just, again, if you're trying to get work doing original things, I just think you want to try and do something small that's original, that's yours. If you try and do a Hellboy makeup in a week with what's in your kitchen and then put it up against next to the Ron Perlman makeup, it's not going to look as good. It might do. There might be someone that pulls it off, but vast majority, it's not going to work as well. So I think it's like going up to, I don't know, Adele and snatching the microphone off her and trying to finish a song off. And it's not necessarily going to work the way you think it does. It might show that you can do some stuff. Again, it's one of those things. I think you want to do some fundamental stuff that's small but well first, and then kind of scale it up, because I see a lot of things that go wrong because people are spreading themselves too thin. They don't have the skills yet to make good molds, and you can find that stuff out on something small, but that doesn't provide impressive looking photos for a college. So it's a bit of a tricky situation.
It's an instance where less can be more. And
I think so.
Students need to learn that and accept that is true.
Well,
a makeup doesn't have to be big to be really amazing.
No, it doesn't. And the thing is, you can see good work anyway. It shines through. It's kind of like it's often the things that you're not trying to do that you spot, that you can see in someone that they might even realize that they're doing. You go, wow, that's impressive. But it's just one of those things where it's because I've heard these things discussed in workshops by the very people you're trying to get work from. That's why I bring these up, because it's not necessarily something that you would know. If you see yet another avatar makeup, it's like, oh, it wasn't makeup in the thing, it was a CG. And although it can be a fun thing to do, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just, if it's just another avatar face paint, that's not necessarily something people are going to want to pay money for. Whereas, like I say, if you can take rubber and make it look like real skin, and I believe it, and you can make one person look 5 different ways using just noses and chins and paint, that's great. That seems to me like a noble sort of project. And again, it's not a lot in materials.
Look at what Louis Zakarian did on Mike Myers for the Pentaveret.
Yeah, that was pretty extensive.
That's maybe a slightly exaggerated example of what you're talking about, but
if you go back to the Brendan Fraser makeups that were in Bedeviled, I think, when with Elizabeth Hurley, Bedazzled, sorry, that had some really, really nice character makeups. Again, some of them were quite extensive, but it was more the choices and the subtle things, and turning this guy who's not freckly into someone that is kind of gingery and freckly, and what does that mean? We've got to lighten his eyelashes. It takes you to all these little places which they're not massive gestures, they're not big, huge.
Yeah, they did that with the Jamie Kennedy experiment, which was comedian Jamie Kennedy. They did these disguise makeups on him, and he would basically prank situations, but they were up close makeups that people he was talking to didn't know it was Jamie Kennedy wearing makeup.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one. I mean, we talked a little bit about some CIA makeup and stuff. There was a book I read, and it was interesting how much emphasis they placed on performance, which, if you're lucky and you're doing a makeup on a show, the performance is taken care of by a very accomplished performer. So you got your great actor, job done. And that can be another thing, if you're doing your makeup on someone at college, sometimes it's just whoever says yes, who's going to show up, that's who's going to wear the makeup. And you can see it in their face that, it's Sharon from Accounts, but we're supposed to believe this is Morclock, bringer of the end of times. And I just don't buy it, because it just she doesn't look shipping. Like it, Well, exactly. It's one of the things. Whereas if you just age that person 10 years and change their body slightly, they had slightly stooped shoulders and their hair was grey at the sides and then a slightly different nose, that would be a believable thing, and it would be a very effective makeup on that person, because I think it's very important to do a makeup that's in sympathy with the real face. I mean, you look back at those Dick Tracy makeups that Cagney and Drexler did, and they were some lovely casting choices, with the rodent and all that kind of stuff, and lips manless, that was Paul Sorvino, and it was just mumbles.
Have you seen the gender transformation that Bill Corso did on his wife?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's incredible. I'll dig it up and maybe we can post that one too.
Okay.
But it's wonderful.
See, it's those kinds of makeups, I think, that are that's what I like to talk about those with more people that do those things, because there's a lot of creative thinking that goes into what you're going to change. People don't just run to the rubber straight away and start piling on the face with stuff. You're not trying to cover as much as possible. It's making very smart, educated, well-produced little choices. And it might just be the ears need to be pushed forward a tiny bit. Maybe the bottom jaw comes out a little bit. Maybe the nose drops a little bit. Maybe the eyebrows are slightly fainter. Maybe the hairline's slightly further back. That combination of things are the right combinations to give that character the thing it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And it's lovely when you see it done well. And I think maybe not having a clear brief at the beginning can be a real handicap. So I think that might be a good thing to do as well if you're doing a makeup for a college, is to have a very tight, like a specific brief, really drill down to, maybe it's a likeness or a character or something, and you try and dial it in as much as possible. I get very excited about those sorts of things, because they're just it's the craft work in it is absolute pinnacle.
Gary Archer made me actually it was Gary and his partner Dominic, who's over there in the UK for Bite Makers, made me 3 sets of teeth.
Oh, cool. Did you supply them with your own cast?
I sent them a cast of my teeth, and Gary made me a set of braces because, my bottom teeth are kind of screwed up, because my wisdom teeth pushed my
Everything
bottom
forward.
teeth forward. So Gary made me a set of braces that made me a set of corrected teeth. So I can put them on and just look like, they've been fixed. And then Dominic made me a set of monster teeth that are really cool. Those guys do amazing work.
Excellent. Oh, wow. Is this for the book?
Yeah, it's for the book.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I can't wait to see those on.
But teeth
That's
is something else, something as little as just a thin veneer of changing the teeth so you don't give somebody a speech impediment, can also change the way they look. You can do plumpers, which way they did Godfather, all kinds of subtle things that you can do to change the way someone looks and make them into somebody else.
Yeah, because the thing about that is as well, if they're done well, that you just snap them into place, and you don't have to be starting sticking on makeup at 3 o'clock in the morning, because you just pop the dentures in, it puffs out. So that's a very, very effective technique, and that's probably something again that colleges might not be able to do, because you need to be able to make those kinds of things. But it's good to know that they exist, and also that those are the domains of other things like costume, like wigs, like lighting, like performance. Not everything is the responsibility of makeup. And if you apportion the right things to the right department, you can get very, very, that's when you get very effective things. Like you look at the Churchill makeup that Kazu did. I mean, it was a great makeup, but it was also a great performance. The costume was right. The performance was good. All of those things working together is what makes the thing work. And
then it was photographed beautifully.
Yes, exactly that.
So it's all elements that are working together to create a whole. On their own, they can't carry it, but together they've built an illusion that is, audiences will look at it and their belief has been suspended. They're in the moment.
Yeah.
And one thing wrong, like a visible edge, and takes them out of the moment.
Yeah. It's interesting how like you say, that there's that very thin line to dance between. And I think it's why when you see like an orc or something in Middle Earth, it kind of works because it's got other orcs around it and it's in Middle Earth. But if you put that same orc in Walmart, it kind of looks stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's
in a suit walking down the street with a briefcase.
Yeah, it suddenly becomes not right. So it needs all of that supporting cast to make it work, which is again why I'm a big fan of doing very realistic looking makeups, because you could have them in a contemporary, realistic world without having to make props and do things. I mean, you can do that, of course you can, but I'm just saying from a makeup point of view, it doesn't necessarily show off your makeup skills better, especially if all that stuff is robbing your time and your energy from doing the makeup.
Yeah, it's ultimately got to be in support of the story, but it needs to look good. Whatever you're making, whatever the story is, the makeup has to serve it and has to be believable.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't have to look real. It has to look believable.
Yes, and the thing is, I know, with regards to things like getting edges and stuff, you'll get better over time, and every time you do it, you document what you do, and you keep the pictures you don't like. The thing, like you said, if there's an edge that's a bit dodgy, you want to capture that stuff, even if that's not what makes it into the folio. The point is, you get to show that to someone else in a year from now and go, why does that happen? And someone can look at that and go, oh, that's because da da da. And you go, oh, I didn't know that. And then the next time you do it, you don't do that thing again. You do it right. Yeah. You nudge a little bit closer to it being better. And that's
you never stop making mistakes. You just make different mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very cool. I had a quite lengthy texting back and forth message with someone. They had some mold problems. They had a beautiful forehead that they made, but as they were opening it up, the silicone was dragging on the mold, and they were getting like ripped edges every time. And I said, send me some pictures of the molds and the core, and they sent me loads of really nice pictures of the molds and the core and the pieces that come out, so I could see exactly where they were getting damaged. And because of that, it was like, oh, I see exactly what's done, and I've done something similar, but this is how I got around it. And I sent back pictures of molds I'd made from the Normski makeup that I did with Neil Morrill, and I'd flared out the forehead mold and all that kind of stuff. It was like, and it was really nice because it's like, I know exactly what that is because I've done it myself. Here's how I get around that. And it takes doing it wrong yourself, so you have sympathy, so you really understand. So all of those things are valuable. They're not wasted. They're all useful lessons.
Was it a slight undercut? It
wasn't so much that it was an undercut. It was the fact that the forehead was kind of like it's difficult to show without drawings, but basically I flare out my extensions so that the where the forehead section is from like just above or below the eyebrows to the top of the head, which is where the piece is going to be. Instead of it sitting flat on the bench, I rotate it 45 degrees so that the top of the head and where the eyebrows are roughly at the same level. So you're basically just orienting the mold slightly different. Gotcha. I have pictures I've done of a chin core, which I'll pop on the show notes so you can see what I mean. And it's just a simple thing of changing the angle so that when the molds clamp together, you get equal pressure. Whereas if the mold is slightly oriented differently, you get all the pressure of the clamp on the lip, but none under the chin because the mold is trying to slide off. Whereas if it's that way around, the clamp's going on like that. So it's kind of, anyway, this is not great audio because you can't see it, but I'll put this picture, like I say, in the show notes so you can kind of see what I mean. Right. I better wrap up because I've got to go and finish packing.
What time's your flight?
Charged.
What time are you taking off?
Early. So, I think it's a 9 o'clock flight or 9:30. So I've got to be out the door by sort of 6:30. So
yeah.
It's a little earlier.
Yeah.
Thing.
So it's you got some stuff to do.
Yeah, a little bit of packing, not too much. It's just a case of what can I not bring because I don't want to. I'm traveling reasonably light, so we'll see.
We'll bring a microphone.
I will. I've got my recorder and I've got my iPad and I'm traveling light. Well, Zoom works on iPad, so
yep.
We'll figure something out.
Cool.
All right, dude.
Safe travels, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, buddy. Take care.
All right. Bye.
You can get in touch through our Facebook page or email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com. Check the show notes for more information. If you enjoyed this episode, tell someone else and help us grow by sharing it on social media. Thanks for listening.
And it'd be good for you to spend some time with kids who don't run around with cameras and monster makeup.